Welcome to your first gitignore file for Unreal. I want to start by explaining that by git ignoring files, we are not saying that we don't want them in our project, we're just saying that we don't want to track them in our version control system. That's an important concept to get. So they are for derived files, they're for valueless files that Unreal builds up as a cache in order to help it do things faster, but we don't want to track that noise in the version control. So that's the big picture. Adding things to .gitignore does not take them out of our project, it just prevents our Git from keeping track of them. So in this video, we'll understand that Unreal creates Visual Studio even projects for us. We'll learn how to regenerate Visual Studio project files. We'll be writing our first .gitignore file and committing our project for the first time so that we have a safe basis to start exploring Unreal and an ability to always dive back and get to a previous state of work. So see you in there. So welcome back. Just want to show you something about Visual Studio, as Visual Studio is what we're most familiar with at the moment. I want you to understand that Unreal is going to be responsible for building our Visual Studio solution files and the other ancillary files that are needed. Let me show you something. We've stripped out all of the files that I said you can delete, intermediate, build, binaries, intermediate, and also the Visual Studio database file can go. If you've done that, because you've deleted the intermediate directory, look what happens when you try and open your Visual Studio solution. You get a load failed. So if you start ever seeing this happen with your Visual Studio solution, then the solution is to right-click on here, on the actual uproject file, buildingescape.uproject in this case, and select Generate Visual Studio Project Files. Now, what that's going to do, if we watch, is it immediately makes this intermediate directory. Unreal will also make an intermediate directory when you open the project, but the files in it that we're interested in are the ones that are going to allow Visual Studio to load, i.e. these project files here.
Hi, it's Sam again. I'm just going to show you how to regenerate your Xcode project on the Mac here. As you can see, right-clicking doesn't show anything in our menu options on the U project. So what we have to do is open up that Unreal project, and there is actually a menu item that we should be loading instead. So if I just get rid of this Xcode file, and in fact I could probably get rid of the builds and binaries and other things too, but I won't do that at this time. Now what you want to do is you want to go into the file menu and go to the generate Xcode project menu item here, and that'll go through and eventually generate your Xcode project, which you can go ahead and open in Xcode.
Okay, so once that's done and that tool is finished running, now we can actually open our Visual Studio solution, which consists of two projects. One of these projects is the UE4 engine, we don't worry about that, but the other is our games, and in this case one game, Building Escape, and then you can go down and you can look mainly at source, and of course there's not really much source in here, there's some general top level files which we'll deal with in a little bit. Alright, so that's a useful and important tip. I'm going to save the solution as I go out. Now Visual Studio opens, and of course when I open Unreal, it will say things are missing because you deleted a load of caches, and you'll start to notice it building up other things, as I said before. Okay, so that's specifically if you have Visual Studio program problems, right-click, generate Visual Studio project files, and it will add some stuff into intermediate and make it all work for you. Cool. So let's get our repository set up now. Unreal is loading in the background. That's fine. That doesn't prohibit us from going along into source tree. Here's my previous repository for the previous game. What I want is a new repository. You can get that from File and Clone or New. Now what we're actually doing is creating a repository of Git type, not Mercurial. We're going to use Git. And then just select the folder. So repos, and I'm going to select my top level folder, not the Building Escape subfolder. I'm going to keep everything tracked in this source control system. You'll understand what all that means, by the way, in a little bit. That was my editor popping up. But what I want to do now is just turn this whole Building Escape folder into a database that can track my changes. So you select the folder, and it's going to bookmark it on the left as 03 Building Escape, so it'll appear up on the left-hand side like that. And I'm just going to say create. And pretty much nothing's going to happen, by the way. But let's go back to the folder when it's finished and take a look and see what's actually changed. Upper level, .git. If you're not showing hidden files, of course you go View, Hidden Items. Now if you're on a Mac, then you just need to do a Google for Show Hidden Files Mac. There you go. And the instructions that come up here about typing or pasting this into terminal will work, but you've also got a relaunch finder. All right, so the .git folder is your indication that the repository is ready to go. That is a folder that has a load of stuff in it. At the moment it's tiny, but it will grow quite rapidly as we start to track all our changes. So this is it. Now, right now, what this is saying, by the way, I've got my settings as a tree view. You can have a flat list. It doesn't really matter. Flat list, split view staging, something like that is going to give you a view, something like this. And this is saying these are all the files that I can see, i.e. everything has changed since last commit because we haven't committed, we haven't saved anything, we haven't got a starting point. The problem with this right now is that it's including all the intermediate folders, all the saved folders, and a load of other stuff that we don't want, all right? So we need to exclude all that stuff we talked about excluding in the previous lecture. As a recap, these were the folders that we need to exclude. We've not seen derived data cache yet, but we'll put it in because it will come up eventually. So we want to ignore these big folders. How are we going to do it? Well, let me show you an easy way using source tree. Select just one of the folders you want, like this, Building Escape Intermediate. You can go to Actions and Ignore. This will be available if it's the first time you've done it. And you can say ignore everything beneath Building Escape /intermediate. Okay, and then just click OK. Now what that'll do is it'll make this guy here called a gitignore file. Right, now you can either continue to add to that the other files by clicking into it in, say, Notepad or TextEdit on the Mac, and then editing it. But look, what we want to do is make it, rather than being specific to Building Escape, why don't we make it like this, intermediate, /intermediate. That's fine. If we put a star on, that says ignore all directories called intermediate. So let's do that. Let's also go, I'll do it in alphabetical order, */build, */binaries, */intermediate. Now, if you're not sure, go back to your slides. Derived data cache, doing it in alphabetical order just for simplicity. Intermediate, and saved. For the purposes of a gitignore, this is what you need. Once you've saved the file, back into your source control, when you add this file or stage the file like that with a tick, have a look through your list of things and you'll find that there's a lot of starter content, but there's no more intermediate. In fact, there's none of those things we don't want. Okay? The final thing we want to get rid of is the starter content pack. Again, you can use the ignore, actions ignore if you like. Ignore everything beneath, Building Escape content starter content. And that'll add that line to the gitignore. You can see it in here, back in your text edit. Now, I will leave the fully qualified path here because it's only for this project, this time, that I want to choose to ignore the starter content because it's large. So, whereas we may be tempted to reuse all this Unreal generated stuff at the top, and by the way, you can just annotate that as Unreal generated files. Like this. Now, if you think that that's not clear enough, you can just get some more hashes or something. It's entirely up to you how you stylize this. You know, something like this. All right, Unreal generated files. Hashes work as comments in these ignore files. And then we're going to want one more type of file, of course, which is, if we look in here carefully, we'll find that we have this vc.bitdb file. Now remember that vcdb file, which resides in here, is 58 meg and it's reproducible and we don't want it. Okay. So again, you can do this lots of ways. One way is to use the actions ignore. I'd make sure, though, that your gitignore file is closed in your text editor because you don't want to start having two different things editing it. So what do we want to ignore? Things with this file extension, okay? So you do that, and then if you look through, you'll find that vc.db file is no longer there, and that your gitignore contains, if you re-add it, it contains star.db. So this is kind of doing things for you. If you want to annotate this as a Visual Studio database file, you might want to. In fact, star.db is dangerous. That's saying ignore anything with a .db on the end. Well, that's too onerous. We specifically want .vc.db. So I am going to finally go back into here. I'm going to copy my comment at the top. I'm going to say Visual Studio generated files here. Now, you can always add more things to ignore later. So we don't need to go nuts. We can save that file back into the source control. Make sure that any changes to this gitignore have been noticed by it. So you may need to unstage it and restage it. There you go. And now it will not have specifically the vc.db file. So we're only left with the stuff that we actually care about. And that is it. Finally, we stage all this stuff, which is like saying, I want to put you in a zip. I'm going to call it initial commit, and you'd click commit. Now, in my case, I'm not going to do that right now, but that's what I want you to do. Okay, so I want you to make your first commit. Catch up with what I did in this video. Get your gitignore file working. Mine is attached to the first lecture of the section. Add and stage all your files, or just click the little checkbox that stages all your files, and then celebrate entering this new world of version control. You're not supposed to fully understand what's going on here. What I'm wanting is for that to happen in context. So go ahead and do that now, and I'll show you what I do when you come back. So welcome back. Here we are. Everything's ticked and staged. I'm actually not going to call mine initial commit. I'm going to call mine a slightly more boring name, which is BEO5 for Building Escape Video number 5, your first gitignore for Unreal. I'm just naming it sequentially according to the videos, but you might want to call yours initial commit, or you can start naming yours after the videos like this. Up to you. Click commit. Now, the only difference you're going to see is that you're only going to have one commit. I've got a few more because I've been doing things before this. I've been keeping track of all the other videos that I've made. So as time goes on, you'll see things like initial commit 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so these are just snapshots, and you might want to name them after the videos. So that's it. You've made a snapshot, and what this means is that you can go back here in future point in time and recover your work as it was. So that's it for now. We have our project set up. We are only storing what we need to store, and you are under version control, so we can finally open Unreal and start safely doing things, knowing we can get back to this vanilla starting state.